Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our YouTube channel for another exciting video on lists. This tutorial is designed for people who are new to Python or who want to brush up their skills for their job interview. And I'm sure that after completing this tutorial, you will able to understand the basic concept of lists in Python. So let's start with today's tutorial, and I would request you all to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can get latest notifications from our channel. So agenda for today's discussion is three important points. First one is introduction, where I would be just giving a brief overview of list in Python. The second important point that we're going to discuss is basics of list in Python, where I would be just walking you through how you can define list in Python programs, what are the different functions, in fact the built-in functions which is provided by Python that you can use in your program. Third important part of this particular tutorial is live demo. In live demo, I'm going to show you how you can define list in your programs and what are the different functions, how you can use those functions in your program so that you can write your program precisely in a very short number of lines. So let's begin with our tutorial, and I hope you're going to enjoy that, and I would request you to watch this tutorial till end. Introduction. A list is a data structure that store an ordered collection of items. A list can store different types of element or item. That is, it could be an integer or a character or both at the same time. In layman term, lists are similar to an array of other programming language, for example Java, .NET, COBOL. But there is a difference. And the first and foremost difference is that when you are defining list, then you are not supposed to define the type of the list. That is one thing. Second important difference is that list can store homogeneous elements or items. That is, you can store character, integer at the same time. In case of an array, you can store only a similar kind of elements. And the third important difference is that list can expand dynamically. So now let's move on to the next section, that is how to define list. So defining list in Python is pretty simple and straightforward. The only thing is that you need to include the elements that you want to store in list within the square brackets, right? One of the important points that you need to keep in your mind is that if you want to store a string or a character, then it has to be included within the quotes. If it's an integer, then you don't need any quotes. Another important point that you need to remember is that each and every element has to be delimited by comma, right? For example, a underscore lst variable is a list variable which is holding four elements out there. First one is topic, second is trick, character a, and number 12. And character and string is included in quotes. And integer, I have not included anything. Okay, so now let's move on to the next slide. The objective of this slide is that you should understand how exactly list is represented in computer memory. For example, there is a variable called lst which is holding three different elements, integer elements, right? 5, -3 and 12, and just underneath those three boxes you have 0, 1 and 2. These are basically indexes. With the help of these indexes you can access value from the list, right? And if you look at the lower section of this image, this is basically just for your sake so that you can visualize, okay, how exactly the list will going to be stored in the memory, although computer only understand the language of 0 and 1. Okay, so now let's move on to the next section, which is basically the features of the list. So there are three important features that I've already discussed, but I'm going to reiterate that so that you can understand. So first one is list can store different types of elements. That is, it can store an integer, it can store a character, or both at the same time. Second important feature is that they can expand dynamically in memory, right? I hope you remember. Same thing I've mentioned in my second or third slide, right? And the third important feature of lists are like they are flexible and easy to use in your Python program. Okay, till now I'm assuming that you are able to understand the basic concepts related to Python lists. And in case if you have any question, just feel free to write in the comment section. I'm going to respond back to your comments. Okay, so now let's move on to the next section, which is basically related to the functions and the built-in methods which is provided by Python. So first thing first, we will be discussing about built-in functions. So there are four built-in functions which is provided with list. First one is len, that is used to find out the number of items in the list. Second one is sum function, which is used to find the sum of the elements which is there in the list. Next is mean and max, the lowest value and the highest value, right? These are pretty simple and straightforward. Okay, so let's move on to the next section, which is related to methods, which is available with a list. With the help of these methods, you can perform various operations on list variables, right? So primarily there are 8 different methods which is available with list. So first one is append method, which will going to add an element at the end of the list. Second one is a sort method, which will going to sort the element of list in a specific order. Third one is a count method, through which you can identify, okay, what are the number of times a specific element occurs in a list. Fourth one is an index method, through which you can find out the index of a specific element. Fifth one is a reverse method, through which you can reverse the elements order in a list. Then you have a remove method, through which you can remove the occurrence of a specific element in the list, followed by a pop method, which will going to drop the last element from the string from the list. And the last method is an insert method, which is used to insert an element at a specific location in the list. Now let's move on to the last section, which is basically code demonstration. In this section, we will going to see the practical implementation of what we learned in last 5 minutes. And in case if you have any question or doubt, just put your question in the comment section and I'm going to respond back to your question, right? So without wasting any more time, let's quickly jump on to our practical session now. Okay, so for practical implementation, I'm using Python terminal, and I've just typed in IPython, which is pretty handy, and like you can execute your small statements rather than writing the entire program, right? So you can also use other IDE. So first thing first, I'm just defining an empty list now. So if you see that a underscore lst with the open and close square bracket, and it sees and you can see that it's an empty list now, right? Now let me just go ahead and assign some values to the list. Okay, so if I just go ahead and print that, you will see that these values will be stored in that. Okay, so now let's move on to the next step. I want to just print the items of the list. I can use the print method, and in the print method you need to just type in within the quotes items of the list, followed by the list variable list. So it will just simply go ahead and print your items which is there in the list. Actually both are doing the same thing altogether, right? Okay, so now let's go ahead and assign some different variables to a new variable, that is b underscore list. And if you see that in this case I am just assigning a character as well as integer value to this particular list. And I hope you remember that list can store homogeneous variable, right? And let me just go ahead and print that b underscore list. So it will going to show all the values which is stored in that particular list. Okay, it's pretty simple. Okay, now let's define another variable, that is c underscore list, and let me just assign some variable to it. And there's first one is a single character, then an integer, then a -12, again an integer. Now I'm assigning a float value, that is -23.90, followed by a string. So you see that you can assign anything to the list, and you're not required to define the specific type for that particular list. Okay, so this is something which is an additional feature and which is advantage of list over an array in any of the programming language. Okay guys, so what I'll do is I'll give you 10 seconds so that you can just go back and see what all we have done till now, and in case if you have any doubt or any question, then please write that in comment section and I'll going to respond back to your questions. And once 10 second is over, then we're going to discuss about range function and how can you just access the specific element from the list via index method, right? Okay, so I think let's wait for another 2 or 3 minutes and then we're going to start off with our next section of our practical session. Okay. Okay, so I think 10 seconds is over. So let me just define another variable, that is d underscore list, and I'm using a list function along with a range function. So range function, I've mentioned 10 out here, so that means I'm assigning all integers starting from 0 to 9. Okay, I just print that variable d underscore list, and if you see that it already has 0 to 9 integer assigned to it. Okay, so now let me do one more thing. It's basically a trick, and if somebody asks you to just create a list with all the odd numbers, so you can also do that with the range function. Basically range accept three parameters, that is a starting point, ending point, and the steps, like at what depth you want to just create those values. Okay, so I think I've just committed a mistake out here, so it just shown only a single element because I've given ending point as 2. Let me just correct that, and I just put a odd number starting from 1 to 10. Okay, I'm just creating a new variable out here, that is uh, odd underscore number, or oh okay, let me just create a variable odd underscore list equals to list function bracket, then range. I'm starting from first, ending point is ending point means like end number is 10 and followed by a step, that is 2. And if I just go ahead and print this variable now, I could see 1 3 5 7 and 9 all are odd numbers. Okay, okay, now try to do the same for even numbers. Okay, it's pretty simple and straightforward. I've created a new variable, that is even underscore list, and again I'm using a list function with a range function. I'm just putting a value as 0 starting point. Okay, let me just print 20 till 20. I'll just print all the even numbers. Okay, so if I just print this even underscore list, so you'll see all the even numbers, that is 0 2 4 6 8 10 12. Okay, now let's move on to the next function, which is basically a index method or slicing. Okay, for example, if you want to access any of the specific element from the list, then you can use an index. So index can be used by specifying uh, an element that you want. For example, I just want to print the index, the value which is there at the first position, so it's 2. Okay, because in Python index normally starts from 0, so don't get confused. In Java and other language, for example in COBOL, it starts from 1. Similarly, I have just tried to print the entire list, and if you just want to if you just specify a colon in between the square brackets, so it will be treated as a complete string because you're not specifying start and end position. Now in the above example, when I do not provide the start and end position, so it just printed the everything, which all elements in the string. Now what I've done is, in this case I have used event underscore list as a variable, and I've just provided colon and the ending point as 2. So what it has done is, it has just printed the first two element of the list. And similarly, if I just go ahead and use event underscore list with 0 colon 2, so that is, I've mentioned the start and end position, so again it will going to show me the first two element of the list. In the similar fashion, if I just go ahead and type 8 as a starting position and ending position as 2, so it has just given me an empty list, so that means that's not a valid combination, right? And in order to get the last two element from the string, what from the list, what I've done is I've just provided a starting position as 8 and ending position as 10. So you have got 16 and 18 as a last 2 points, last two elements of the list. And similarly, if I just specify the starting position and 8 and colon and then leave the next section as blank, so it will going to print only 16 and 18 as the last two items. And similar thing you can do with the help of for loop as well. So I'll just quickly show you how you can do that. So I've just defined a for loop for I in event underscore list. So this is basically a list. It will going to iterate through all the element of the strings. Oops. Okay, so there is something wrong that I've done. Actually, I miss comma in the print syntax. So here you goes, when you print when you just click on enter, so it will going to print all the items in the list starting from 0 2 4 6 8 10 12 14 16 and 18, right? So this is pretty simple and straightforward. Like, you can use for loop to print all the items in the list. Okay, so now let's move on to next section. And before moving to the next segment, I would again give a break of 10 seconds where I would request you all to go through what all we have learned in past couple of minutes. And if you are happy, then probably we can move forward. And in the meantime, in case if you have any questions, doubt, or any any suggestions, then please do mention in the comment section. I'll just take that up from there. And in fact, if it's a question, then I'm going to respond back to your question. Okay, so let's wait for another 1 or 2 seconds, and then I'll move on to our next section of this particular demo. Okay, so I'm back again, and the next thing that we're going to try with the list is like, let's concatenate two different lists. So what I've done is I've just defined a list x with the variable with element 10 and 20. Then I've defined another list of y, which is 30 and 40, and I just go ahead and print them with the print function of Python. So I'm just typing in the string that concatenation of two lists would be. It's pretty simple. Again, simple, nothing hardcore specific to Python. You can just simply put x plus y, that is basically your two list, and then just hit enter. It'll show 10 20 30 40, right? So that's what, as I mentioned, that it's very simple to learn Python, and in fact the code is very precise. Okay, so now let's move on to next section, where we're going to try a couple of functions. I mean the built-in function that list supplies. So for example, first of all, I just want to check what is the length of a particular list. When I say length, it means number of items which is present in the list, right? So x has actually two elements in that, and it's again has just shown an error because by mistake I missed comma out there. So when I just corrected the syntax and just type the enter, so it just returned the string length of list as 2, which is correct, right? Now let me just check the length of the event list that we have created. So it is having 10 elements over there, right? So you can see yourself, like, using built-in function is very simple. Otherwise you might have write a for loop to just reiterate into each and every element of a list or an array, and then you can find out. Similarly, I just want to find the sum of all the elements which is present in the list. I'll going to use the sum function. In the previous example, I've incorrectly mentioned the length, so it's actually showing the length. In the in the next sentence, actually I've just changed the length function with sum, so it's now showing the sum of all the items in that particular list. Similarly, let me just find out the maximum or the highest number in that particular list, right? So I'll just replace the sum function with a max function. So that will show me the highest value of in that particular list. Okay, so it's simple. Similarly, because 18th is the highest number, so similarly I'll just going to fetch the minimum value from that particular list. So I'll just replace the max function with the mean function. So for example, if somebody asks you to find out the uh, lowest salary of an employee which is stored in an list, so what you can do is you can use a mean function to find out that particular salary. Okay, so I think you're pretty much clear with all the built-in function that we have discussed till now. Okay, so now let's move on to a couple of more uh, functions that we normally use with the list. So for example, in this case, now I want to just print the second item of the list, and what I'm going to do to print that particular item is I'm going to use the index, right? So I just mention the index as 2, and at the second position the item 4 is stored, so it has been printed. Similarly, I just go ahead and want to print the first element of the string of the list by using negative index, right? So I'm going to provide because our list is already actually having 10 elements, right? So if I want to print the first element of the string by using negative index, so it would be the last value of that particular list. Okay, and in case if I want to print the first element by using a positive index, then it would be 0. In case if I want to print the first element using the negative index, it would be -10, because in our list it is actually having 10 elements. Similarly, if you want to print the last element of this list while using the positive index, then it would be +10. And in case if you want to print the last element while using the negative index, then it would be -1. Okay, so when it is like a positive index, it will start from 0. In case if it is a negative index, it is going to start from -1. I hope by now you are clear with the slicing indexing concept, right? And in case if you have any doubt, then please don't forget to mention in the comment section. I'm going to respond back to you. Okay, so now let me try a couple of more operations with the list. So what I've done is I've just defined a list a underscore list equals to 10 and 20 as of now. And what I'll do is I'll going to append a new item that is 30 to this particular list. So what I've done is I've used a append method, and as you know that append will going to add the item at the last of the list. So if you see in this case, I've used a underscore list dot append and 30 and without any quotes because it's an integer, and when I print the value, it has added 30 at the end of the list. Similarly, I just want to insert topic trig after 10th, right? So that means at first position I want to insert topic trig. So what I've done is a underscore list dot insert position. I've specified 1, that's an index, and I've specified topic trig in quotes because it is a string value, right? Okay, I think I've committed a mistake. I should not use a square bracket, it has to be a simple close bracket. Okay, so let me just correct that and rerun this particular syntax. So what we're going to do is we're going to append topic trick and first position. So now let me just go ahead and print that. Here you go. So if you see 10, after that it's topic trick, then 20, then 30. Now let's talk about another function that is called extend, and with the help of extend function you can append the all the items from other list. For example, if you see a underscore list dot extend equals to xy, so xy is actually one which is having 10 and 20 that we have defined above, right? So it has appended all those elements to my a underscore list, which was actually having all those elements that we have defined above. Now let's talk about the various methods which is provided by list. The first method is dot clear, that will going to clear out your all the elements from the list. And if you see a underscore list, I have just used dot clear method to clear out all the elements from the list. Similarly, now let me just go back and create list once again, a underscore list that is having 10, 20, 30, 40, 10, 10 dot topic trick. And if you want to see the count, so count will actually let you know the count of a specific element in that particular list. So in this case, let me just go ahead and check the count, and if you see 10 appears 3 times in the list. Okay, so I've used a count function, and in bracket I've specified 10, so it has just given me a count as 3. Now I hope you remember that we have used a function called dot remove. So that function is used to remove a value from a specific list. And remember, in case if you have 2 or 3 occurrences, then it will only remove the first occurrence. So in case if you see in this particular example where I have created a list and I have tried to remove 10. So 10 was initially at 3 different times, but now it has removed the first one. Okay, so there is another simple method that is known as pop. So this method is actually used to drop the last element of the string. So what I've done is I've just mentioned a underscore list dot pop with no parameters in bracket, and you see it has dropped topic trick from my list. Similarly, I just want to sort all the elements in my list, so I can use the sort function, and that's what I've done in my next piece of code. So a underscore list dot sort with no parameters in case if you want to reverse the order, so there is specific parameters, so you can specify reverse equals to true or false. So in this case I have applied the sort with no parameters, so it has taken the default value and it has sorted my list, that is all the elements within the list. Okay guys, so I think I should again give you a break of 10 seconds where you can just go back and see what all things we have covered till now. And in case if you have any question, then please do mention in the comment section. I'll respond back to your questions. Now let's work on a couple of list comprehensions, kind of tricks that normally use with list, and with the help of these tricks you can write your piece of code in a very precise way, right? So let's try to print the square root of first to 10 numbers starting from 1 to 10, 1 2 3 4, whatever be the square root, whether it's a even or odd number. So just give it a try, just give it a thought, and in the meantime I'm just trying to write a small snippet for you. So what I've done is I've just defined an empty list over here, and I'm using a for loop with a range function starting from 1 to 11, because I need to just print the square root starting from 1 till 10. Okay, so I've used a dot append method to add the square root of each and every variable to my square root list. Okay, let's run this code now. Oh, okay, so actually I've committed a mistake. It says that sq is not defined because I've used sq as s as capital letter. So let me just go ahead and change it to caps, and I rerun the code. It has calculated the square root and it has stored that. So if you see 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81 and 100. Okay, so now let me just ask you guys to try to calculate square root of all what do you call all these numbers in a single line of code. In the meantime, I'm just trying to write a single line of code for you guys, and you'll see by yourself that with Python you can achieve 4 or 5 lines of code in just a single line, right? So here what I'm doing is I'm doing the same work with a single line of code, so you yourself can see that 3 line of code is converted into a single line of code with no declaration, nothing, the way you used to do it in another programming language. So this is basically a beauty of Python, that you can actually reduce the line of code that you actually write with remaining or different programming languages. Now let's try to write a square root for you guys can try to write a square root of all the even numbers or all the odd numbers, and just mention your code in the comment section so that I can just check. Okay, and in the meantime let me just write down a small snippet for you to print the square root of all the even numbers. So process is exactly same, you only need to tweak the code that I've mentioned above. Okay, so what I've done is I've just corrected my mistake. I've just defined a new empty list, and then you can use a for loop and you can just tweak the code, but I won't be going with that approach. So what I'm doing is I'm just using a single line of code where I'm using sq equals to x uh, square for I in range 1 to 11 and with step as 2, but it's giving something wrong. It says 100 and can you guess what is the error I've committed in this sentence or in this syntax? I got it, what I've done. Can you guys mention in the comment section please? Okay, so let me just correct this code. Here you goes. If you see x is something different and I is actual variable which will going to uh, iterate through all the elements of the list. So here you have the square roots of all the even numbers 0, 4, 16, 36, 64 and 100. Now you can try to do the same thing for odd numbers. The only thing is like you need to just tweak one parameters in the range function. So I'm writing the code in the meantime. If you guys can just guess what would be the parameter that needs to be tweaked. Okay, and guys don't forget to mention feedback regarding my session, because that is very important. Then only I can improve my upcoming sessions. So again I've just created a square root which is an empty list, and I'm using a for loop along with the range function to create the square root of all the even numbers. So if you see, the result is exactly same. Now question for you guys, and I would request you guys to write a single line of code to get the odd numbers square root starting from 1 to 50. Okay, and I'm not going to give you the code, and I'm sure you're going to write that simple piece of code. Okay, so once again guys, thank you so much for joining this particular session, and I would request you all to just take a moment to leave your feedback and let me know what are the things that I should improve, so that I can take care of all those feedback in my next upcoming session on tuples. Okay, and once again guys, thank you so much for taking out time and listening to me so patiently. Bye bye and take care. Thank you.